So, have you ever really thought about what makes a business a partnership in the eyes of the law? It's not just about two people deciding to call themselves partners. It's way more specific than that. In this explainer, we're going to get right into it and break down exactly what the Indian Partnership Act of 1932 looks for to decide if a business is the real deal.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how a partnership is even determined. Then we'll get into the 3 essential ingredients you absolutely must have. After that, we're going to bust a really common myth about sharing profits. Then we get to the big one, the true test the courts use. And finally, we'll see how this all works in a real-world Supreme Court case. Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, how does the law actually decide if you've got a partnership? Because, spoiler alert, it's not just about what you say you are. There's a much deeper standard.
And here it is, straight from Section 6 of the Act. A court won't just look at a piece of paper. Nope, it has to look at the real relation between the parties. That means digging into everything, how you act, what your agreements are, the whole context, to figure out what's really going on.
So let's talk about the foundational recipe, if you will. To even be considered a partnership, you have to prove these 3 core components are present. If you're missing even one, then legally it's not a partnership.
So, ingredient number 1, there has to be an agreement. This is super important because a partnership comes from a contract, not just because you're related or something. Number 2, the whole point of the agreement has to be to share profits from a business. And number 3, and this one is a really big deal, the business has to be carried on by everyone or by any one partner who is acting on behalf of everyone else. Remember that last part. It's going to be huge later.
Okay, so that second ingredient, sharing profits, brings us to a massive misconception. So many people think that if you're sharing profits, that's it, case closed, you're a partnership. But is that really true?
Let's just put the question out there directly. If you are getting a cut of the profits, does that automatically make you a partner? Is that the smoking gun?
And the answer from the law is a big, clear no. Sharing profits is what we call prima facie evidence. You can think of it like this. It's a strong hint, it definitely gets the court's attention and makes them lean in, but it is not the final conclusive proof, it's not a slam dunk.
And these examples really drive the point home, right? A person who lends money to the business might get a share of profits back as part of the deal. They're not a partner. An employee might get a bonus tied to profits, also not a partner. You can see there are plenty of legitimate reasons to share profits that have nothing to do with being in a partnership.
So, if sharing profits isn't the ultimate test, what is? Well, this brings us to the absolute core concept of partnership law. This is the thing that really separates the wheat from the chaff.
And here it is, mutual agency. This is the whole shebang. In a real partnership, every single partner wears 2 hats. They're a principal and owner, but they are also an agent for every other partner. What does that mean? It means the action of one partner can legally bind everyone else. One partner signs a bad deal, guess what? You're all on the hook for it. This is the true test because it implies this incredible level of trust and, frankly, shared risk.
I mean, look at this quote. It doesn't get much clearer than that. The law itself calls the existence of mutual agency the cardinal principle. That's not just some fancy term. It means it is the most central, fundamental, non-negotiable rule. This is it. This is the real test.
Okay, that's the theory. But how does this all play out in a real courtroom? Let's take a look at a landmark Supreme Court case, Santaranjan Das Gupta versus Dasiran Mirzamal, to see how a judge actually applies this stuff.
So in this case, the court went looking for the evidence of that real relation we talked about earlier. They had a checklist. Did they have a written partnership agreement? Nope. Did they keep separate bank accounts for the business? No. Did they have a joint bank account in the partnership's name? Not a chance. Did they even tell the official authorities they were in business together? They did not.
So the Supreme Court looked at all of this, or the lack of all of this, and the conclusion was pretty straightforward. The facts just didn't show that these people were acting as agents for one another. That critical test of mutual agency completely failed, and so the court ruled no partnership here.
All right, let's wrap this up with the key things you need to remember. First, you have to look at the whole picture, the total relationship, not just one thing. Second, sharing profits is a big clue, for sure, but it is not the final word. Third, the true test, the cardinal principle, is always mutual agency. And finally, that real-world proof, bank accounts, records, official filings, that stuff is absolutely critical to prove that agency exists.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. It's not just about what your contract says. The law looks deeper. In your own ventures, how does the day-to-day behavior, the way you and your partners actually operate, reflect that deep, binding trust of mutual agency? Because at the end of the day, that's the real question.